Dzień dobry, witamy Państwa serdecznie w kolejnym WEinnovators Club. Jest to dość wyjątkowe dla nas spotkanie, bo po pierwsze łączymy się ze studia po raz pierwszy, ale jak Państwo widzą, reżim covidowy mamy zachowany. Z Pawłem nie podchodzimy do siebie na wszelki wypadek. No i cieszymy się, ponieważ mamy wyjątkowego gościa przede wszystkim. Tym wyjątkowym gościem jest Toomas Hendrik Ilves, były prezydent Estonii, a przede wszystkim guru internetu, guru GovTechu, ale nie tylko on jest naszym gościem, ponieważ prowadziła będzie to Justyna Orlowska, która jest polską guru GovTechu, a potem nastąpi debata. Paweł, czy ty też jesteś podekscytowany, tak jak ja?
Jak najbardziej i zarówno i tym miejscem, tym naszym otoczeniem, bo jesteśmy w Trend House, w studio w Trend House Cambridge Innovation Center w Warszawie, więc to jest to taka nasza odmienność od tych naszych cośrodowych spotkań. No i też oczywiście ekscytujący gość, ekscytujący goście tak naprawdę i ekscytujący temat.
To, co zapewne jest ważne, to to, że już to nasze blisko 40. spotkanie zaczynaliśmy rok temu i nie przypuszczaliśmy, że tak fajnie, znaczy przypuszczaliśmy, ale nie byliśmy tego pewni, że tak dobrze rozwinie się WEinnovators Club. Cały czas mamy nowe pomysły, cały czas mamy nowych gości. Dzisiaj po części prezentacyjnej nastąpi bardzo, bardzo ciekawa debata, ale o tym dowiedzą się Państwo już bardzo niedługo. To chyba tyle z naszego wstępu. Dziękujemy, że są Państwo znowu z nami. Nasze filmy będą dostępne na YouTubie i pozwolą Państwo, że przejdę teraz na język angielski. Okay, I would like to invite Mr. Ambassador of Estonia, and I would like to ask you for a few words about our guests and about your and our cooperation. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bartosz and Pavel, Honorable President Ilves, ministers, dear participants. It is indeed my pleasure to say a couple of words of welcome today's webinar devoted to digitalization of public services. And I thank the WEinnovators Club and against Rozvoj Przemysłu and all other organizers for putting together this interesting agenda and list of speakers. And thank you also for involving the embassy in this venture. It is my distinct honor to welcome President Toomas Hendrik Ilves tonight. Apart from being one of the chief architects of Estonia's EU and NATO accession a couple of decades ago, he has been the driving force behind the digital transition in Estonia, in Europe, as well as globally. And President Ilves took Estonia's strengths in digitalization and innovation to the world stage, and Estonia has become our identity, our positive brand, and has made Estonia bigger. But President Ilves also has invested a lot of energy in developing close relations with Poland. During his 10-year tenure, 2006 to 2016, President Ilves made an unprecedented number of visits to Poland, altogether 18. And I'm happy that you have, President Ilves, you have kept your engagement with Poland also after leaving office. It is a remarkable year for Estonian-Polish relations as we celebrate 100 years of our diplomatic relations and 30 years of renewal of our ties. It's been an opportunity, I think, for us to look back to the past, but also look at what the future could bring to this close relationship. And I think today's event can contribute to shaping the future agenda. Both Estonia and Poland will commit significant funds for digitalization as we all try to emerge stronger from this pandemic. And I'm sure Mr. Ott Velsberg, the Chief Data Officer of the government, as well as Dr. Ain Aaviksoo from Estonia's prime cybersecurity company Guardtime will give you some insights what the Estonian government as well as companies have in mind for the future. At the EU level, Estonia and Poland share the view that our companies need digital single market for innovation and cross-border online services without unnecessary barriers. In order for the digital single market to properly function, all EU citizens should have access to high-level, trustworthy and widely usable electronic identity, which the member states should ensure. And we also need to improve the current system of cross-border interoperability of these IDs. Poland also has made great strides in digitalization, and recently we've seen a true acceleration in the uptake of public services online by users. And pandemic, of course, has been one of the factors. A number of documents, such as Polish government's AI policy, have been adopted, and I'm sure that the key person on all of this, Ms. Justyna Orlowska, as well as other experts, entrepreneurs, will talk more about these efforts. In February, Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki announced that Poles expect a digital revolution. And I'm happy that some of the key people in Estonia, starting with President Ilves, who have been in the forefront of this revolution, have joined us today to share their experience and views. And thank you again for your attention. I wish you a great webinar. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. We are very happy that you are with us, and I hope that it's not the last meeting between Estonia and Poland in WEinnovators Club. And now I would like to give a floor to Justyna, our specialist and our expert of GovTech. Justyna, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Bartek and Paweł, for a year of WEinnovators. Thank you for inviting me to run tonight's event, and thank you for all those warm introductions for our guests. And please allow me to also welcome our guests from around the world, I can say, to our discussion. My name is Justyna Orlowska, and I am joined by a very special guest, former President of the Republic of Estonia, Mr. Toomas Hendrik Ilves. Good evening, Mr. President. I am also joined by a very distinguished set of panelists, Mr. Jan Sarnowski, Deputy Minister of Finance of the Republic of Poland and the creator of the Polish version of the Estonian corporate income tax. Welcome. Mr. Ott Velsberg, Estonian government's chief data officer. Hi. Mr. Ain Avikso, previously the Estonian undersecretary for e-services and innovation in healthcare and currently chief medical officer at Garstein, Estonian leading deep tech company. Welcome. Ms. Marta Lewandowska, Head of User Experience at the GovTech Center in the Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Poland. Hi, Marta. Mr. Konrad Kostrzewa, CEO of Veturai, a leading Polish startup in the field of machine learning. Hi, Konrad. As well as Wojciech Janek, Deputy Director of the GovTech Poland program at the Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Poland, who will be moderating the subsequent panel after the first part. Since we are all meeting virtually, we will of course be discussing digital transformation. Why do it, when to do it, and perhaps above all, how to do it. Luckily, I am joined by a person who is prepared to answer these questions more than anyone, because he pretty much invented this term in Europe and in the world, and at the very least personified it. Before I hand the floor over to President Ilves, I know he's a very modest man, so it falls to me to tell everyone a bit about his achievements and accomplishments. And there are a lot of them, so I will try to mention just a few of them, because otherwise we would be talking about them for hours and maybe for days. He is known to have built the Estonian powerhouse of digital state and driven it for 10 years, between 2006 and 2016. But this is far from everything. He also served twice as his country's Minister of Foreign Affairs, leading Estonia's entry into the European Union and later representing it in the European Parliament. He also serves in numerous international bodies, from the World Economic Forum to the World Bank, and more recently to the Real Oversight Board of Facebook. Finally, he is also a distinguished academic, holding several degrees and giving lectures all around the world, including being a distinguished visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. Our Polish viewers may remember him as the voice of a radio-free Europe, advocating for progress and liberty. Tonight, for the next 20 minutes, he will speak about the process that drives these two values today: digital transformation. Mr. President, the floor is yours. Unmute, please.
Dziękuję, Justyna. And I'm very happy to be in, if not physically in Poland, at least speaking to one of my favorite countries, one of my favorite topics. Let me start off, before I get into the real details, I would say that the most fundamental transformation that this century has and will determine the success of future nations is whether countries manage to make a digital transformation, by which I mean a transformation of public and government services to people that will and already does form the infrastructure of 21st century life. You know, Joe Biden proclaimed sort of this big infrastructure project. Unfortunately, it looks only at wiring or roads, but in fact, the infrastructure of services and how governments provide services to their people will be the crucial issue, I believe. I came to this conclusion after 3.5 years in Stanford, in Palo Alto, where in a 12-kilometer radius, I had the headquarters of Tesla, Apple, Google, Facebook, Palantir, and YouTube, all of the most modern things offered by the private sector, and the public sector was at the level of the 1950s. And I think this will become a major handicap for the United States if they do not deal with this. Public services are what we need to develop digitally, and we need to develop them not only individually in countries where already significant steps have been made, but within the European Union, we need to do the same thing. A separate topic I won't go into today, but I will just mention in passing, is that we especially have to do this in the field of security, because until this millennium, security war attacks were always kinetic, where force equals mass times acceleration. Every war till this century has always been kinetic. But from 2007 on, beginning with Estonia, where once again we were the leaders, we saw the first non-kinetic hostility, and in von Clausewitz's terms, the continuation of policy by other means, which is von Clausewitz's definition of war. When Estonia was effectively shut down by our eastern neighbor using digital means, and not a single shot was fired, yet we were overcome. So we need to start thinking about this, about digital, also in terms of our security and fundamental security. Where we are today in the European Union varies from country to country and a huge amount. There are certain fundamental things one needs in order to have an effective digital state. The most important one is, of course, a secure and unique identity tied to a population registry. This is where the absence of political will mean that a country will not digitize. There is no political will in the United States for a strong digital identity. There is little will in, for example, the UK to do this, though some attempts have been made. Across the EU, we see more successful and less successful attempts. But the point is, if you go back to the original cartoon in the New Yorker in 1993, where there's a dog sitting next to another dog, and one dog says to the other, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. It's true. On the internet, unless you have a secure identity that is unique to you, digitization of public services and governance will never work. And a reliance on the sort of standard private sector model of an email address plus a password does not work. It is always brute force breakable. The problem comes in is that governments are afraid to do digital identities, largely because they don't even understand why you need one. But when you're online, we must know who everyone is. And that's where the problem comes in. In addition, and what increases requires more political will, is that unless a government makes IDs, digital identities, mandatory, it will not work. Because the sociology of identity is that you will get 15 to 20, maybe in some countries 25% of the population. The early adopters will say, oh, I think this is cool. I want to have a digital identity. The rest of the population will not go for a digital identity unless they are forced to. The problem is, if you only a small percentage of the population, or say 20% of the population has a digital identity, then two things happen. One is that no branch of government will really want to invest in developing the public services that you can use with a digital identity. Why? I mean, if you know, as a government minister or as a senior government official, that 80% of the population or 85% of the population does not have a digital identity, then you go, well, why should I even invest in this? On the other hand, in terms of public uptake, those people who do have identities, they will not really use services because they haven't been developed. So you're stuck. This is why after the decision is made by a government to issue a digital identity, then the next step is you have to make it mandatory. That is not always popular. And then the next smaller mistake that you can make, which is made by Japan with their My Number program, where they did in fact issue everyone identities, is that they were afraid to take the final step, which is to make the number, your ID number, something that is public. Because if it's not public, you're not going to be able to do very much with it. You can do some things, but for example, I mean, in terms of communications with others, and also in general in terms of building out your services, if you're afraid of letting a rather simple and boring number be public, then you won't go anywhere. So identity is crucial. How you do it exactly is not that crucial, because even that will change. And the basis of identity, I mean, the system we use now for over 20 years, which is fundamentally a token-based system with a chip and a chip card, that's going to change. That will not last. However, the principle of a digital identity is what will have to remain. From there on in, the next step is actually having a decent architecture to allow you to connect to everything that you legally have a right to connect to. This is, again, technologically is not that difficult, and there are numerous good solutions. The one that we have has now been adopted by Finland and the Faroe Islands and Iceland, and has also been used by a number of other countries to lesser degrees of success, but that has to do with their implementation. So even Moldova has it, and it's being used in parts of Mexico and in Panama, but incompletely. The point is, it is a good system. However, what is far more important than the particular architecture you use to connect everything is that you need to actually make it conform to your legal system and your regulatory system, And let me give you for an example. In Estonia, there are things that are public that are not public in Southern Europe. For example, how much cap money is distributed to cap receivers. That's something which, when Estonia's commissioner pushed through that we have, that all public monies must be known publicly, and then there was a regulation which he pushed through, which then made that public. Spain, France, Germany took the commission to court, and in fact, the court ruled that no, this is a violation of privacy. We will have discussions of privacy and versus transparency. We believe in transparency, they believe in privacy. These are cultural matters, but you have to figure out what you want and what it is that people can see and what people cannot see. Trust in the system for us within this architecture is brought by mutual reciprocal transparency. I can see who looks at my data just as much as there are all kinds of things such as my property records, which people can see what I own. And when I was in government, once a month, someone from one of the newspapers wanted to see, well, what does he own now? I, on the other hand, could see who was looking at my data. So, I mean, the architecture is something that, again, will require political decisions, and also it's what takes a long time to figure out. I mean, and a simple example on, for example, what is called workman's compensation in English, or sort of what you get for accidents from the government, that the social ministry can look at that single line in your healthcare record, but they can't look at anything else. I mean, working all of that out takes a while. So you have to be prepared to make those political decisions on who can see what. And the final thing, which is something that Dr. Aaviksoo can speak to about far more than I can, but it's a fundamental issue that requires addressing by any government. And that is the issue of data integrity. Europe, and the US too, is obsessed with data privacy. That's nice. Data privacy, however, is the little thing. Data privacy is if someone finds out what my blood type is. Data privacy is someone finds out what my bank record is. Data integrity is if someone changes the record of my blood type. Because if someone does that, I can die if I've got the wrong record. Data integrity is that no one can change my bank account, especially because it's unlikely they would change it to make it bigger. So data integrity is a fundamental issue that governments have not paid enough attention to. We have in Estonia since 2008 put all critical national data, including health records, property records, also our laws and our law cases, all on a blockchain system, keyless signature, which Dr. Aaviksoo can talk about. But those are the elements you must address: identity, architecture, and finally integrity, because ultimately, it can all work and it's very nice, but if you don't have data integrity and people can change things around, forget it. The entire trust in the system will collapse completely. Now, since I have very little time left, I would say, what are the challenges that we face? I see the real challenge for Europe is to make all of these services interoperable across borders. Today, there is one cross-border interoperable service, public service, and it only works one way. And that is, I proposed 10 years ago to the President of Finland that since they use the same architecture as we do and the same identity system, why don't we do it so that the several million Finns who visit Tallinn every year to drink and then have too much fun and then they lose their medicine, that you can use your ID card in order to get your Finnish prescription in any pharmacy in Estonia. First of all, it took 8 years to get there. Not because it's technologically difficult. That could have been done in a week, but the political decision to get there took 8 years. But what is architecturally and technologically a problem is that our system accepts other people's IDs, but their system does not. So it only works one way. So Finns can come to Estonia and take out their medicines here, but Estonians, if they go to Finland, can't take out their medicine there. But that's an example of the kind of cross-border services that we should be working on within the European Union to develop. It should be so that anywhere you go in Europe, if you need to get your medicine, you can call your doctor, he can add it put it into the computer, and you can go to your pharmacy, be it in Warsaw or Lisbon or Rome or Athens, and you can get your medicine. There is nothing at all that technologically prevents that. It's all political. Even more important for Europe, I would say, is cross-border access to healthcare records, so that if I go on vacation in Sopot and I get sick, well, there's no reason to expect that a doctor in Sopot can read Estonian medical records. That's absurd, of course. So, but I go see a Polish doctor. I identify myself and authorize him to look at my medical records. He gets to see my medical records, but they all arrive pre-translated, so that everything that is in Estonian shows up there in Polish, and he gets to see that, okay, your cholesterol is a little high, your blood pressure so-so, those are the kinds of services that makes Europe open, and it makes Europe whole and united, because you know that throughout Europe you can access those services that are crucial to you, most importantly, of course, healthcare. Again, come back to my one and only and boring message. This happens with political will. If European countries that have developed the political will to digitize their own services need to unite to go and get the rest of Europe to actually adopt the same kind of legislation and regulation that will allow us to have pan-European digital services. It takes a lot of work, but I'm counting on Poland and Finland and some other countries to actually take this step. And with that, I've spoken too much. Dziękuję. I'm very happy you're doing this.
Thank you very much. Dziękujemy. Thank you, Mr. President. It wasn't too much, of course. I think it's not enough, of course. That is why we have a set of questions. But like to sum up briefly, I think what I would summarize would be no silos. And those silos within countries, within institutions, between institutions, and between countries. And cooperation, but cooperation, and of course will to do that. Without will, nothing is possible. But everything can be possible. So now let us move to the discussion, and I will first ask our experts to ask their questions. And if they so wish, but I promised that we will all participate in the discussion, and I intend to keep that promise, of course. So after our experts, I will open the floor to all members of the audience. I see there are quite a few questions already, but if anyone missed it, you can ask your questions through the appropriate button. Don't forget about that. So, but before I hand the microphone over to our experts, I also have one question of my own. And Mr. President, could you answer? Being a digital leader is one thing, but having the world recognize you as one is another. How can countries move from the first to the second part?
By doing it. If you do it, at this point, there are so few cases of successful digital transformation that anyone who does it will be noticed. And of course, by doing innovative things, that also gets you noticed.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So now we are moving to Mr. Jan Sarnowski, Deputy Minister of Ministry of Finance. Minister Sarnowski, if you could ask a question, your floor is yours.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Mr. President, you've said much about the digital identity. You see, recently I've heard an excellent summary how Estonian technological superiority is actually being perceived in Poland. You see, according to one of my students, in Estonia, there are only two things impossible to do using the internet. To transfer ownership of real property, of real estate, and secondly, to get married. So I'd have a question concerning the future.
Also to get divorced.
You see? But you see, I'd have one more question concerning the future of GovTech. GovTech understood as technology in the service of both citizens and administration. So can you see any new ideas, new solutions that were introduced or are currently being developed in other countries that Estonia or more widely Europe could implement in the nearest future? Maybe what would be the most pressing IT tools still needed in Estonia?
Well, I think it's a technological difficulty, which is that on the one hand, our distributed data exchange layer, X-Road, is really good for security and for accessing data. It does have a technological drawback in that it makes access to open data, to large data sets, difficult. It is being worked on right now, but that's something which, I mean, on the other side, you have countries that have a lot of open data, such as the UK, but on the other hand, it's not, I mean, it's not secure because they don't have the compartmentalized distributed data exchange layer that we have. It's an issue that needs to be worked out. So, I mean, it's a trade-off. I mean, if you get more open data, then you have bigger problems with data security, and that's something that we are working on.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now, thank you, Minister Sarnowski, for asking a question. And now we are moving to Mr. Velsberg. What is your question?
Yes, thank you. So my question to you, Mr. President, is how we can, from Estonian side, keep ahead. So we've been the leader in e-government for a long time. How we can still keep our heads up the water?
By having a government that cares about digitization would be my first comment. And I think we have one now, but we went through a period in which our heads and noses were barely above water because we had a government that didn't really care about it. And so what you need, and this leads on to, I guess, a larger point, you need to have, you need to really have educated ministers, not only the so-called IT minister, but you need to have ministers who understand digitization, digital technology. The general rule I have seen is that digitization works if the person who knows something about digitization is politically not far away from the prime minister or the president, because you need the president or the prime minister to say, now we have to do this. I don't mean politically in the same party. What I mean is close in that the prime minister or the president listens to that person. I mean, this was, I mean, in Estonia, we had a period in which our CIO, Chief Information Officer, Taavi Kotka, talked to me regularly and complained regularly and pushed things regularly. If the prime minister or the president doesn't care, well, then you get stagnation. So I would say that for innovation, you need to have a prime minister or president who cares about it enough to have an advisor close to him or her and listen to that person's advice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So now the chance of asking a question has Mr. Avikso. Could you ask your question? Am I properly pronouncing your name? Surname?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. So thank you. Mr. President and Toomas, so we know each other. I will say the keyword that I'm going to asking about and maybe explain it. So it will be technological sovereignty for Europe. You have, tried to build and have succeeded in kind of making the Estonian story heard in the world. You have also led a task force in Europe trying to, get European countries and people and bright-minded people to work together. And you have also lived now just recently in Silicon Valley, where we all know all the companies that were born. So is there a hope that Europe will retain its technological sovereignty? I'm not that worried about Estonia. I'm really worried about Europe. So what is your word of wisdom to get the European act together?
Well, I would say several things. One is that first of all, I'm less worried about the United States and their companies than I am about China. And I think that there are two problems here. One is that there is this almost neurotic fear of GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, which drowns out the concerns about liberal democracy, how we do these things. It's all those damn Americans. And part of the problem is not only that their companies are so big, but it's also because they don't pay taxes. And the obscene situation we have where companies make billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars or euros in Europe and pay no taxes on it is something which really these companies have to realize it's got to stop. On the other hand, when we look at the global situation, we have to admit that it is only in the European and American or North American space where technology exists fundamentally in a liberal democratic environment. We have, yes, surveillance capitalism, and they make all their money by scraping our data. But what we also see emerging, I would call algorithmic authoritarianism, where you have authoritarian regimes using all of the latest in tech and often more than is even available in the West, facial recognition, AI, censorship, and let's face it, those things are also all possible using technology and is being used today in digital technology. If you say the wrong things, your message will be cut off. In Russia, if you like, not even share, but like the wrong thing, you can end up in jail. So authoritarian regimes are exploiting technology in a completely Orwellian fashion, following people, recognizing people, eliminating privacy, persecuting people. So I would say that the real battle for digital sovereignty is not as Germany and France see it, as between Germany, France, and then Silicon Valley, but between Western liberal democracy and authoritarian regimes that very effectively exploit technology.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So now we are moving to the studio, I think, because I want to ask Marta Lewandowska if you have a question to Mr. President.
Yes, I have a short question. Mr. President, how was your the most important decision in the digital development in your country?
Oh, that's very hard to say.
I'm so
convincing various prime ministers at different times that this was a good idea, because I didn't have the political power to actually do anything in my various positions, but they did, but I managed to convince them to do something. So there are many of those decisions. No single one. I would say personally the most important thing that led me to do any of this was that I learned to program computers when I was 15, which was 52 years ago, and actually led me to the idea that we need to teach children early to be on computers and how to use them. And that, I think, was the most important lesson I've learned. And I encourage all countries to get kids online, with not to play games, but to actually learn how to use a computer as early as possible.
Digital competences, yes.
Thank you.
So now we are moving to another person in the studio, and this is Konrad Kostrzewa, the CEO. Could you say your question?
Yes, Mr. President, my question is, because we are talking here a lot about advantages of digitalization, but what do you think are the greatest risks that we have to be aware of when digitizing our economy?
Well, doing it wrong, but you can do it wrong in all kinds of ways. I mean, not paying attention to security, allowing stupid things to happen that take away people's trust. And as soon as people don't trust digitization, they will not use it, and they will go back to paper. I think one of the problems we have with our procurement processes, which is true in all of Europe, is always, I mean, not figuring out how to get the best thing, but the cheapest. So you end up, you can make very cheap things online, but they may not be very good. And we don't have, and most of our procurement agencies don't have a way to figure out what's good and what's not so good. They only know how to look at cost. And then, I mean, moving on, I mean, you really have to make sure your legislation guarantees fundamental rights and freedoms, because if you don't, then someone will abuse it, and then people will lose their trust. In all of these cases, it's always really that you have to do it so people will use these services, because otherwise they will demand paper.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So now questions from the audience, and I'm sorry not to ask all those questions because the time is running out, but I will ask those who has the most votes. And the first one is, what is the next big thing for the e-state services in Estonia and Poland?
Well, I think that we can actually start, well, I mentioned one of them, which is to get this to be in all of Europe. But I think that the incorporation of interactive AI for various processes is something that we should be able to bring in fairly easily if we apply ourselves. I mean, based on medical records, you can sort of start thinking of the healthcare service suggesting things to you. Doing taxes, you can, at least corporate taxes, since you monitor income and outgoes, You can do that in real time. We already do that in real time, and tax authorities can become a genuine service, saying, okay, your company here isn't doing too well right now. Maybe we should think about how we tax you. Maybe we should give you a tax holiday or something. But bringing AI into the services that we offer to our people would be, I think, a general direction to take. But before that, I still think that we need to make the political effort in the EU of getting digitized countries to come together and actually force through the pan-Europeanization of digital services. That's really what I think calls out for the most action today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. President. The question was coming from Artemi Olin. Thank you very much. And now the question from Michał. So Michael, girl, we have a great working digital profile in Poland, which is to be expanded in the future. It is a great solution for the citizen. However, my question to you is, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, that's what digital services are for, to help the citizen. I mean, what we have, I mean, if you think about government services throughout history, it's always been, I mean, sort of the burden has been on the citizen. You have to go to the government office. You have to apply for something in person. You have to do it by hand. There's no need for that. I mean, once you digitize, in fact, you don't have to go to a government office. One of the tremendous advantages, sort of conceptual advantage of digitization of governance is that governance has always been, before the digital era, a serial process, a sequential process, meaning you go and get a piece of paper, and either you or then the piece of paper goes from one office to another office and gets a stamp, and then it goes to another office. Once you digitize, government work becomes a parallel process. Another advantage that comes partially out of this as well is a dramatic decrease in petty corruption, because in fact, so many things that used to involve citizens interacting with public servants, they would get things done if you paid them. I talked about this to Greece a few years ago, and the person interviewing said to me, "Oh, faki laki." I said, "What does that mean?" Well, in Greek, it means little envelope. And this is a concept, or at least was a concept in Greece, that if you want anything done in a government office, you have to give the official a little envelope. So I learned 2 words in Greek there, hard to forget, at least as Greek words. So you reduce corruption. I mean, these are the kinds of things, you just make governance better, and people trust it more, like it more, and that's the direction we should be going in, because if you can make government services easier and more pleasant for the citizen with less effort, less hardship, and especially during COVID with less contact to other people, you're actually doing something very good for your populace.
Okay, so like seamless and invisible the government thanks to digitization. And the third question is also from Artemi Olin, because it's the most popular within our audience. And it is, sorry for pronunciation, Tere Ohtust, Herra President. Greetings on behalf of the Estonian living in Poland. The development of any IT product, including estate services, requires continuous development and improvement. And and I have a cut here, what is possible to have ID document in the app in our smartphones?
Well, we do. We have a smart ID This is something that you register through your card ID, and you can use that. There are actually two systems. We have a smart ID. We have a regular ID, which you get by reprogramming your SIM card. But that's useful only in your country. But worldwide, a smart ID, you have registered it, programmed it, your computer, so that, I mean, you do it via your computer, and you then you just use your smart ID to perform the tasks that you would otherwise do with a card reader and your chip card. And I would use it much more, except that at my age, reading a smartphone is not as easy as it used to be, and so I prefer a big screen, but that's the only reason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so well, enough questions for tonight for the Mr. President, and I would enjoy nothing more than to make and extend our discussion in the late evening. And by the way, I see you all agree with me, judging by the number of questions left still, but unfortunately we're out of time. I will very shortly hand the floor back to Bartosz. This said, I hope that if we take one thing away from tonight's discussion, it is that digital transformation with no silos is not an abstract concept, but something we all can and must achieve. And with this political power, but all of us power, with like power and willing. Everybody, if everybody needs this digitalization, then it will be all right. So. I hope I will prepare my pronunciation next time. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now we are moving to the second part. And Bartosz, now over to you. Thank you very much.
Justyna, thank you very much for a great moderating the panel. Toomas, thank you very much for all tips to our country. I have to say that Estonia is one of the best. My country, I like it very much. So thank you very much. We are very proud of this evening, and I would like to. We have a small present for you. We have one surprise. Claudia, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Could you show your work?
Yes, just give me a few seconds. You can make a little introduction. What will it be? So that the temperature is rising, because I need like 15 seconds, please.
Okay.
All right. Almost
Claudia
there.
is our special weapon. Oh, I can see you.
Okay. Yes, and now, yeah, it's good that you see me, but what you need to see is something I did, because I am not the most important here. What I did is more important. Okay. You should be seeing my iPad. Is it so?
I do. Yes.
All right.
Yes, we can see it.
My role today was, just sitting quietly and listen to the whole discussion and grabbing the absolute essence. So what I did, and what might be helpful for you to understand what's the logic behind it, I was grabbing the answers to the questions, what is necessary for a great and full country digitalization and digitization. So these are the tiny numbers, the green numbers that you might follow through the whole note. And that's the little summary that I did through the whole meeting. So it will be shared. It might be also filled with some extra data that I didn't grab on the go. But it was wonderful listening to discussion, and I hope to visit Estonia as fast as that I will be able to.
Okay, Claudia.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It looks lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will
You're
share
very welcome.
it with you, Thomas. We hope that you can share it with your audience, for example, on Facebook and LinkedIn. So thank you all very much. And now we will have a second. We will have a debate. And Wojtek, it's your time. Please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Claudia, great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wojciech Janek, and I'm a Deputy Director of GovTech Center, and I will be your host tonight. In these dark times, we really have one thing that gives us hope, and this one thing is technology. Technology and the data processing gives us information not only about new cases and deaths, but also about new vaccinations. The outstanding process and the progress done in last 30 years shields us from a lot of pain and suffering this pandemic has brought. And it really gives us some hope for the future. And speaking of the future, I have with me some outstanding guests tonight that are really the leaders, the technological leaders in their fields of finance and IT. So with me, let me introduce Mr. Jan Sarnowski, Deputy Finance Minister of Poland. You've met him earlier. Mr. Ott Velsberg, Chief Data Officer of Estonia. Ms. Marta Lewandowska, the UX Team Leader of GovTech Center. Mr. Ain Aviksu, Chief Medical Officer at Guard Time, a leading Estonian startup. And Mr. Konrad Kostrzewa, CEO of Vetrai. Let us start with the question to Mr. Jan Sarnowski. There's much talk about Poland's success in the fight against tax evasion, especially the VAT. And I would like to ask about the role of technology and the role technology played in this success. How much would you credit to technology, and how would you say it was important in this process?
Well, thank you very much for your question. At the very beginning, you said that in these troubled times, there is only one thing that gives us hope. You said that it was technology, not only technology, but also fair taxation, low and just. So we did some significant progress, and there are some numbers that are backing it. You know, according to the European Commission, in the last 5 years, the VAT gap in Poland has decreased almost threefold. That is from almost 25 to 8.2%. What does it mean? It means that the VAT gap in Poland is substantially lower than the EU average, 2 times lower than, for example, in Slovakia, and 4 times lower than in Romania. How is it possible? You are very right. It was done thanks to the introduction of numerous IT tools, in many cases developed in cooperation with the Polish GovTech program. So Poland implemented a very wide range of technological solutions, especially the modern big data analysis systems. You see, through the gradual introduction of electronic online reporting standards, currently we are, for the first time in history, able to automatically analyze over 100 million invoices every month. Polish administration was also the very first one in Europe to adopt the anti-money laundering systems to detect not only money laundering, as it was intended to be, but also financial flows that are characteristic for VAT frauds. So the key to the growing precision of our analysis and to reducing the VAT gap lies exactly in combining the data from different sources. Our algorithms can analyze, examine data from invoices issued to customers, from cash registers, from financial flows between Polish companies done via bank accounts. And now we are also doing our best in order to gain other sources of data, other sources of information. Through our new tax solidarity initiative, removing Chinese walls between countries and trying to make our cooperation as deep as possible. First time in history, our algorithms will also examine the international trade between Polish and foreign companies. How are we going to do that? Through opening our data sources to other countries and through acquiring data about the international trade from our countries. The very first country which will enter this kind of cooperation with Poland will be Slovakia. Last month, Poland concluded and signed an agreement with the Slovak Republic, which basically in only a few months' time, in July, will enable us to have direct access to the Slovak database, the databases of the Slovak tax offices. And on the other hand, Slovaks will gain access to our analytic technology. The next country to sign the agreement and to open the databases to us will be the Czech Republic. The negotiations have already been concluded, and we are now basically waiting only for a time slot in our ministers' calendars. But you see, I strongly believe that the next country to sign an agreement with us after the Czech Republic will actually be Estonia. You see, in October 2020, we signed a declaration enabling us to launch the negotiation process. We are in touch with the Estonian Ministry of Finance, and I'm very, very sure that it will be Estonia that will join our campaign against VAT frauds, a campaign that is actually in Poland being successfully concluded mainly through the IT measures. The IT measures in which we all know Estonia is truly and undeniably our regional leader. So at least as far as sealing the tax system from loopholes, from problems, we could actually look into a bright future made possible through, firstly, international cooperation, and secondly, through the utilization of modern IT solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If we talk about Estonia, I think the next question should go to Mr. Ott Velsberg, the government chief data officer of this country. Mr. Velsberg, I would like you to tell us more about the biggest change the government has to do in the recent times. I'm talking about the digital systems, of course, and maybe if you could talk, relate something to what Mr. Sarnowski said about the algorithmics, about the AI systems and the use of the AI systems to analyze data.
Thank you, David, for the question. So I think it is important to reflect back to what Mr. President and Sarnowski also mentioned. We had integrity, combining data, cross-border data exchange. So within the last few years, and especially in the last year, starting from the COVID crisis, we have seen that data governance, so really managing data quality, managing metadata, this has seen an increased interest across the government, across different agencies. So this is one of the key aspects that we have seen in the last year. And this also reflects, Minister Sarkowski mentioned open data, for instance. This has tremendously affected the same field. In the last year, the number of open data sets has increased more than 4 times. So this is only possible because COVID has raised importance of data across the government and across citizens as well. And related to that, we have seen a lot of interest related to AI and data science. For instance, our unemployment agency just this year received the best award for their forecasting system, which forecasts the probability of unemployed people getting a job identifying the factors that influence it, offer them assistance. Similarly, our tax authority has invested a lot of attention has been paid to customer service analytics to really understand why people contact the government in the first place. And this is to really help combat the COVID crisis, mis and malinformation. We have had the same problem in Estonia, different agencies, different ministries, different publications, news, they provide information that are not coherent. They talk against each other. So from ICT side, we are able to at least, or we should try to make sure that the information that the government spreads is coherent and feeds positivity. And I see that data science here is a really effective way to combat that. And as a result, we came out with a concept called Cracked AI, which is a virtual assistant for the citizen and providing citizens one way to receive all the information they need. Also do all the deeds. So if your passport or ID expires, the government will notify. In future, you will able to renew it and so forward. So short answer, a lot of more attention has been paid to data, both data governance and data use.
Thank you very much. Excellent answer. Thanks. When we talk about government systems, I think it's natural we go to Marta now. Marta, every day you take care of GovPL, that is a very important part of Polish digitalization effort. Could you please tell us something about the relationship and the difference between private sector online presence and public sector? What are the challenges here? What are the differences and maybe advantages of each one of them? Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. I'm responsible for designing interfaces in gov.pl, and I'm sure that we in the public administration we are in the good position because the method of creating IT systems in public administration is the same like in the commercial companies. For example, we design in the methodologies like design system, and thanks to ready-made components, it helps us to create and build a website very quickly. And we don't have carry out long tender. I'm sorry. And we are goal focused, and for what is the most important for us, it is opinion of our users, because thanks to this we know what they need, and we can create IT systems useful and efficient. The gov.pl was visited 26 million unique users per 1 month at the beginning of the pandemic. This was the visits user when to websites peaked, but recently report conducted by Genius Poland shows that GovPL is in the top 20 the most visited websites in Poland, and the pandemic has shown us that digitalization is very important, and we created a lot of systems very in a few days sometimes, because thanks to modular systems in gov.pl, we can build websites like gov.pl coronavirus, gov.pl, gov.pl for other purpose in order to help our citizens. So generally, opinion of our users and user experience, it is the most important part of our process of creating the best IT systems. So without asking our user, we don't know what they need. And I can give you an example. Recently, before we started designing the system for communication between citizens, officials, and business, we asked almost 7,000 respondents what they needed, and according to this information, we prepared priority list for all operations, and it is people who tell us what is important to them, and we try to implement it. At the last, thanks to design system, we can create websites without the participation of development, and it takes a short time for us. You see, we are like a company goal-oriented, and it is a very change approach. Instead of the long process, we try to do it very short. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We talk here a lot about private sector involvement. So let us now ask two of our private sector's members here. Konrad, I want to put the next question to you. I know your company is working with the public sector. I know also with GovTech. Could you tell us about your ideas, how we can make this collaboration better? I mean, there's a lot of complaints about public tenders, I think, in every country. How can we make it better? How can we make it more efficient? And how we can get there where Mr. President was saying, so the fully digital world faster?
Sure, thank you for the question. I think that there are two main actions that have to be taken to actually take this cooperation between private and public sector to the next level. The first thing I believe is that we have to narrow the information gap between what the public sector knows and what the private sector knows. What we observe right now is the situation where the private sector don't really know the problems of the public sector because the institutions there are very unique. In business, you have the whole sector, similar companies. In public institutions, you have only one Ministry of Finance, one national bank, and so on. So these are very unique problems the business doesn't really know. And on the other hand, the public institutions often don't know whether these problems can be solved with technology. So this is, of course, there is the GovTech Poland program that narrows that gap very well. But I think that we need more platforms where actually public institutions and private companies can discuss, can collaborate, and draw conclusions from this dialogue. And the second thing that I believe is equally crucial is that we have to somehow mitigate the risk that public institution would take when implementing innovative solutions. The way I see it is that when the public institution identifies the problem, would like to solve it with a new technology, then there is a risk of failure, and nobody wants to accept the risk of failure. So what happens in reality is that they have to start a huge project that costs a lot of money, that lasts years. At the end, it of course can be a huge success, but it also can be a huge failure. So what we need is something very similar to GovTech. What happens in GovTech Poland is that we need a platform or some tools where we can quickly do cheap pilot programs, and with those pilot programs actually validate the theory whether certain technology can solve the problem. If it does, then we scale it up. So these are, in summary, I would say that we have to increase the dialogue between the two parties. And the second thing is that we have to mitigate the risk for the institution that implements the new solutions.
Thank you very much for this answer. I think the dialogue we have here, limiting the risk, well, that's something bigger, but I totally agree. I think it's an excellent idea, and I hope we can work in the future for it. Now I have a question for the last speaker here, Mr. Ain Aviksu. You are working in a medical startup concerning data, and we all hope that something will be better every day. Could you tell us, please, what is the future of medical data, and what are the breakthroughs that we can expect? Where is the next big thing coming from?
Thank you for the question. Well, what I believe strongly is that the data will be free and controlled by citizens, and this is something that we can look at the example of vaccination certificates or COVID certificates that we are currently involved, among other things that we do. And I know that most of the emphasis is currently on this passporting, and people hope that this will open up traveling once again. And this is certainly interesting and perhaps even relevant in this context. But at the same time, I acknowledge as a citizen that there are potentially disputed issues. Vaccines are still not yet available to everyone. People are worried about the privacy and things like that. But I would look on the bright side here as well. And this is probably a situation that has given us a unique opportunity to think what would be possible if each individual would have their information about their health with them. Well, in this case, we talk about the vaccination certificate, but when we started working on these solutions with the WHO, now already 10 months ago, and with the Estonian government, and now we're working with around 40 different governments, it was really first about the what we call care continuity case, which means that if I get vaccination in one country and I would need to get a second shot in another country, I could have my medical record with me, and then the health professional would know what is the vaccination that I need. Or we are quite probable in a situation in 6 or 9 months' time that we need a revaccination because the new strains of this virus are probably coming, and we need another boost. And then I might be in another country, and I might then need and have then this opportunity to have this health record with me. But the platforms that will be created through this, I really hope that will not be just about this idea that it is for the border guard. No, we are working to empower citizens, and maybe if you think the same platform could be used for e-prescription. You can go anywhere and you have your health information with you. It is secure. The integrity is protected, as President Ilves said. Nobody can change the diseases that you need this prescription for, or also the process, how this information came to be, because integrity is not only about the data as it stands, but the other healthcare professional or the pharmacists has to be certain that if you have this document with you, then they may be held liable if, for instance, they sell you something that might be harmful to you. But if they can be certain that this medical information with you is correct, they can be certain that this is about you, and they know that this is consented. So that's the future that I see, and that is what I hope will come out of this pandemic, regardless whether the passporting of vaccination certificates will become a reality or not.
Thank you very much. This is really an interesting thing. I think the e-prescription that we have in Poland is something that really helped us through the pandemic immensely, because it allowed within a few weeks to implement online medical services and really help this. And I think also the importance in what is important in Poland and how it shows how serious we take this digitalization effort is that the Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki is also the Minister of Digitalization in Poland. I think that sends a very strong message that this is something of top priority, and it also reflects inequality. Before we go to Bartosz for the final speech and a summary of the whole event, we have some questions. We have a question here from Artemi Olin to Marta on cross-border acceptance. Any plans for finally allowing logins to gov.pl, that's a Polish platform, with foreign IDs? The option is there, but it does not work for any foreign ID, including my Estonian ID. Marta, what is your take on this?
Yes, thank you for question. Absolutely, yes. We are working on that, and we have login.gov.pl, and thanks to this way of login, every country, every foreigners will log in to our services, and we are working on that with other countries. It names like single digital gateway, and I hope it will be soon as possible. So far we have accessible for several countries.
Okay, thank you. Now we have the same question, and then it's the same person, but the next question is the basis need for business is cross-border e-signature acceptance. And maybe Konrad, maybe you could help us here. And the e-signature acceptance should be mandated by local state laws. And what is your take on this, Konrad? Do you think it is something necessary? And
yes, I agree. I totally agree with it. The pandemic showed us that e-signatures are something that we really need. We really need to run a business. And nowadays, without such solutions, I think that that the business loses time, loses money, because sometimes you cannot operate as quickly, you cannot start cooperation as quickly because you're waiting for the documents to arrive by traditional mail. Not everything can be done with e-signature. So that is something that would really, really speed up our digital world.
Okay, and we have one more question to Marta. You're very popular here. Can you share us about how many public websites from different agencies and institutions you have finished, and how many plan to move to gov.pl template? So there's a big move to gov.pl template of different templates. Maybe you could tell us something about it and how it will.
Yes, of course. First of all, gov.pl is the main website of Republic of Poland, and it consists of 1,000 websites, such as with unified visual layers, websites such as the website of Prime Minister Office, all the ministries, public prosecutors' offices, and fire brigades, and numerous other offices. I finished a lot of projects for public administrations, and thanks of design systems, it took not a lot of time.
Okay, thank you for this. Okay, then I guess this is it for our panel now, and I will ask Bartosz to give the final speech and maybe summarize the event. Thank you very much, and thank you to our guests, Mr. Minister, and all of those who traveled online here from Estonia. Thank you very much, and thank you to organizers. And I give now my voice to Bartosz. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all our guests. It was really inspiring evening. And what to say? I think it's hard to add something what you said, because everybody knows that digitalization is a future of countries. Mr. Toomas Hendrik showed us how it looked in Estonia, and we know that it's very good example of e-country, I would say. Thank you, our great Polish guests. You showed us that we are at the high level of digitalization, and I would like to thank our technical support. Thank you very much for your work. I would like to thank our sponsor partners. I would like to thank Pavel, because he's a guru of WEinnovators.club, and I would like to invite you because for 2 weeks we will have next guest, and it will be Philip Roche from Microsoft. Thank you very much. See you, and remember to like our posts on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. Thank you very much.